Good morning, Quasar Markets Live. I hope everyone enjoyed your President's Day holiday. I have the legend himself, BigBeat on Wall Street. Steve, how are we doing today?
I'm good, man. 3-day weekend usually shortens the trading weekend. So I expect some volatility today, some catch up from the weekend. Australia raising rates. What the heck? Okay, so here we go. I just saw that Euro stocks just hit an all-time high, and the India's 10-year now holding above a little above the three-year low there. So world is catching up, understanding what we need to do. Why are we so far behind the 8 ball?
I'm not sure. As you said, though, a bunch of information we have to bring up. As the U.S. markets were closed, the rest of the world was rocking and rolling. You got the first one off the bat. Stock 600 all-time high here.
Yep.
And a lot of it just based upon the fact that their earnings are looking pretty good finally over there. That to me was the biggest takeaway that I had, was that earnings are actually leading this up. And as you can see, 557, it stalled out a little bit last week, but it looks like it wants to continue to move up. As you said, also, Asia, China, everything moving up today. Alibaba, Tencent, all of those, as President Xi met with Jack Ma and shook hands. I mean, just a few years ago, he was talking about putting him in prison and sort of put him into house arrest. So,
Jack Ma left the country. He ran out of the country.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that everybody's taken the fact that, there's so much fighting in here in the U.S. as a chance to kind of say, hey, we're going to fire our salvos and try to show that it isn't only King Dollar and we all have stuff going on too?
I think there's a couple of things going on here. I think that we're still adjusting to the new president. He has a lot on his plate. His agenda is big. Doge is moving very swiftly through the federal government with a lot of things there. And I think that it's really hard to manage everything. And on top of that, the federal government is getting smaller very quickly, including the Fed. I understand that the Doge is going to the SEC this week to start cleaning house there too as well. And because of that, I think a lot of people are nervous, right? And you're starting to see, I think we can talk about it quickly here, that Warren Buffett made a lot of changes in his portfolio over the last month or so. We don't know exactly when he did these changes, but we can kind of guess. But he has the highest cash pile in history. He had one the last time.
Yeah, and 310 billion. I put it across the bottom there.
310 billion. He could buy Disney worlds, all of it. When you have that much cash, Elon Musk took his 40 billion and bought Twitter, right? There's a lot of things that he can do, and he's not doing with it. He has not gone whale hunting, as he calls it. He has not looked for companies, and companies that he does own. I was just in the grocery store over the weekend, and I saw the Kraft Heinz section, and it's smaller. So the companies that he does own, that he usually likes the cash flow, is starting to get a little smaller because he's in places that inflation has really picked up. So I don't think he's actually in touch. So if the brightest minds in finance are out of touch with what's going on. And I just saw that the percentages to GDP to the S&P is at .com levels right now. This is not a good place to be. I think a lot of people are unhappy. And when I talked about that from that perspective, right, people are feeling unease right now, and that's really bothering me right now. And I'm not liking this market. Look. Even in bad markets, the best times are in bad markets. What do I mean by that? Some of the biggest shoots up in the stock market is usually when the markets are falling out of bed, right? So, because people are shorting the markets. So, I think we need to be very vigilant here in the next few weeks, making sure and seeing where the Trump administration goes, what Buffett starts to do, what some of this investment money goes, institutional money, I should say. You can't all go into AI money. Listen, it just can't, right? So they got to find a place to put this, and I'm not seeing it. And crude oil at $71 a barrel. We're now seeing the 10-year back above 4.5, 4.523%, and dollar at 107.05, and the gold back at 29.20. Those things all tell me exactly what's happening, right? That people are nervous about it, and we talked about this last week. Junk bonds, right, are actually doing it again. So there's so many things happening here that it's really starting to bother me a little bit. And when things bother me like that, Howard, I'm usually out. Now I'm happy about one thing that you and I were talking about, and that's NVIDIA, right?
Absolutely.
NVIDIA back to 140, 152. We nailed that one pretty hard. We knew there was an overreaction to DeepSeek. So what I said last week before that, and what we're saying this week and the week next week, probably the same thing, is that this is not a market to be playing investing, right? This is a stock pickers market and finding problems, right? NVIDIA getting beat up over DeepSeek. Seriously, come on now, people. That's ridiculous, right? DeepSeek is a joke, right? This week it's Grok 3, and I just play with it. It's terrible, right? This is what we're talking about. So find those positions, and we'll find them for you out there. We're looking for them too. But at the same time, if Warren Buffett can't find a place to put money,
then why do you think you can? Right? Why do you think you can? Right? I believe with that. I want to go over. You hit so many things there, man. You hit like half the stuff on my list of bears here. So let's go through some of them.
Right minds, right?
So let's start with Japanese investors starting to go global. So you were over there. We talked about the weaker yen. We've talked about that with Stephen Flanagan a lot. We saw that 1.6 trillion in yen were bought in global equities, the biggest jump in 1 month in over 2 years. So we are seeing some foreign investment still coming into the U.S. I do want to point that out. And that's why we're saying it's a stock pickers market, right? There's money on the sidelines. They're going to put it in, whether it be the Japanese investor, Warren Buffett, or BigBeat. Eventually, all of you are going to put your money back into the market. So be watching what's going on. What we're saying is, it's hard to leave your stuff in. And I could point to stock after stock here that if we start to look through some of the losers today that were the winners last week. And that's, I think, goes to a little bit like you're saying, JD, right? Chinese stocks, we know it was a high flyer last week, gapped up, now moving back down to 40. So we see a lot of those that were up last week. Ford down 1.79, Delta that was up last week down, CVS that had the big move up, back down. So you got to be very quick to take your profits, be a trader more than an investor here. Is that what you're telling people, Steve?
100%. Yeah.
Okay. And then you briefly touched on gold. I want to go back a little bit. Gold did jump up and hit another record, 29.42. Again, as we see the fly to safe haven, but it really doesn't seem to be that to me. It seems to me that we keep hearing more and more about central banks, right, that are adding to their reserves, throughout the world. So I think that's what tends to lead to that. And I think
a lot of that central bank buying could possibly be led because Elon Musk wants to go to Fort Knox and go audit Fort Knox. Now, that's a lot of talk. Okay. And I understand that. But if there's less gold than we expect, Bitcoin's going to be not 96,000. It's going to be 196,000. And
that would spook the world.
The world would get spooked, and they'd be buying gold. Gold won't be $3,000 an ounce; it'll be $10,000 an ounce because we have the largest reserve of gold on the planet. And if you don't know, a lot of the gold is under JP Morgan. So, I mean, we know that there's banks around the world that also have the gold. It's not just Fort Knox, right? We do have normal institutional banks that own gold too, as well in New York.
Absolutely.
So we need a good accounting of gold. We have a very good accounting of how much Bitcoin's out there. I know we have the good accounting of
it should all be on blockchain. We'd answer those questions. Silver's holding kind of steady, Steve, not really moving up anymore, stalling out in this 32.50, but nice to see it hold above that 32.50 level here. Keeps me bullish. I know you've been bullish on silver for a run back up at least to this 35.50 and then up to that 43 area. Looks like it wants to make that run here. So silver looking strong. Again,
We're
a lot
going.
more talk about, again, you need it for the industrial boom that we're seeing in, start to take back in place in India, and as Russia sort of comes back online there. So, silver, you've been talking about it. One that we don't talk a lot about here, but I did see some information I wanted to ask you about was copper. A lot of talk that copper dropping here, as you can see, pretty dramatically over the last 3 or 4 days as the U.S. and Russia peace talk kind of pick up. Are they our biggest spot where you get copper? Is that why that's picking up, Steve?
I think copper right now, it could be a more thinly traded market here, but copper is needed. I think you heard that from Peter a couple of weeks ago in rebuilding some of the homes out in California. Even Kentucky now. All of these problems, even Florida, they need copper. Why? It goes into air conditioning. It goes into copper wiring in your house. There's copper is used for everything, right? I think copper, yeah.
Nat gas, Steve, up about 2.29% here, but in general, prices had dropped. The EU is talking about changing how their mandate works on gas storage. So they're talking about allowing people to increase the amount, or countries to increase the amount of natural gas they hold on their storages. And the UK gas futures actually hit a 6-week low.
Yes.
While we're getting killed here, I see you with a sweater on in Florida today. The UK and Europe has actually had a milder winter than expected.
Yes, that's good because Russia and Ukraine supply Europe with their nat gas, and they had slowly, we talked about this, they moved their from nat gas into heating oil and gas itself. So there is a supply and demand, right? So the supply has stayed the same, the demand went down, and that did lower the price. It's still cold. Do we still use nat gas in the summertime? Of course we do. We still got to cook with it. We do all those things. But right now, nat gas is still going to stay high as long as weather in the United States stays cold, because New York and the New England area is where nat gas is, and so that's where they use a lot of it, and they burn through it pretty quickly. Con Ed is exactly a good if you look at ED, the stock ED, you'll see what they've done over the last. There you go, Con Ed. You can see right there, Con Ed is following nat gas prices. We talked about that. When middle of winter, you could have bought some calls here on Con Ed, and you would have done very, 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 very well on Con Ed.
They were the ones you talked about when nat gas was down at that $3 level here back earlier in the year.
That's right. Yeah. And I think it's very cyclical, as we know. In the summertime, it gets down. You can see last summer prices are coming down. You can see the summer before that prices were down. You see where pretty much the buying is, and you see where the pretty much the selling is. Con Ed's one of those stocks that it's pretty easy to trade, actually.
It looks like it's fairly cyclical. We talked a little bit. You talked about Buffett. I also saw, while he hasn't, we see a lot of the big funds had jumped back in or up their amount in AI. I saw Soros's fund boosted its Google and Amazon stakes. Third Point Holding increased Meta and Tesla. They did drop some of their Apple, and we know that Buffett kept all of his Berkshire. Berkshire kept its position in Apple, but cut a lot of the banks, Steve. Were you surprised by that at all, that he's cutting all those banks out?
I mean,
if you're going to Bank of America,
I mean, there's a good chance that that the housing market absolutely collapses here. I mean, we've got to lower rates. We just saw Waller a few minutes ago saying that he doesn't want to cut rates until we get rid of this inflation bump. Understandable. Inflation has bumped up a little bit. I don't like it. Well, we need to be cutting rates. If we don't, we're going to have a housing market correction here. It's going to get worse than it already is. And for the most people, a lot of people, the majority of their wealth is tied into their homes. That's not a good thing to do, by the way. But that is what people do. And to me, that's scary, right? Now, in the United States alone, that is what the United States has the most of. It's what we pride ourselves in this country for, is land, right? With oil and natural resources. We have a lot of natural resources in this country. So that's one thing. But when you look at it from the perspective of the investment side of things, I can understand why he cut the banks. There's not a good margin anymore. They're not lending out to people to buy. Why? Because right now it's the highest debt ratio on people right now, on credit card debt, on debt on their actual homes they already own. People are going in debt because of rent. People are going in debt because of high inflation. So banks say, well, you know what? This is not a good place to invest. So we're not going to give you any money. So we don't give you any money. They don't make money either. Rates continue. It's a never-ending story. And so what happens, Howard, is that bank stocks will probably go down. And I expect some of those banks that are smaller or mid-sized banks. Now, I know that Janet Yellen a few months ago said that banks are sufficiently
Funded, right?
funded
Capitalized.
right now, but and we heard it again, but I don't think that they are. I think there's a lot of problems here, right? And I don't think people are keeping their money into the bank as much as they were. We know that the savings rate is way down, probably the lowest it's been in a very long time. So if the banks don't have any money to lend and they're raising their reasoning to not give you money for a new house, and your debt on your other properties and your debt and credit cards and your debt on your new car is too high, there's a problem here. And I think he's
Absolutely.
smart to get out of the banks.
Where one place he did make a strong move, and you can see it's up about 5% since the announcement. Constellation Brands, one you and I have talked about a lot, one of the biggest wine beer companies in the United States. The Sands family behind that company. A big, big in Mexican beer, huge
We
in
just
wine
talked
and
about it,
spirits.
right? It is a stock picker's market, right? And the stock is way down. If you pull up
It's been beaten up tremendously.
if you pull up a weekly chart on STZ here, I think you can pretty much see what's happened here, right? There you go. It's fallen out of bed, right? And you're going all the way back. Yeah. So, I mean, if you want to buy and you think you feel like this is where there is some institutional holdings down here. So, yes. Do I feel like people are drinking as much as they were? Heck no, I don't. I really don't. With weight loss drugs and everything else going on, I don't think people are drinking that much. Or I should say hard liquor. It's a different situation. Constellation Brands needs to change a bit. And I think we are. Look, I've seen things that Coca-Cola has now is cream soda in a can now. I mean, you're starting to see some of these stalwart companies getting away from their normal brands and trying to, work their way into a younger generation. But right now, I get it that he's buying it, and that's great, and it's probably going to bring some institutional buying. I just don't see people spending more money, and Warren Buffett hasn't been very good on investments lately. So,
oh no, we saw what Ultra Beauty. Yeah, this is one I sort of question. I will say again, they are the leader. They are the largest wine company in that $9.99 sort of bottle. And when times are bad, I can tell you from my years when I ran a liquor distributor, that's when drinking does go up. When people are in, not making much money and upset, drinking.
When they're very, very happy or very, very sad. I mean, that's just what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was one that he did move in. That was moving to the upside.
Now, if you want to talk about Warren Buffett,
SMCI, Steve, continuing to move up here until I see them. They've claimed that they're going to make that earnings report, but they still haven't yet. And they only have about a week left, I believe. So, I can't be personally.
If they don't, man, this stock's going to go to $20.
Yeah, this is one that I'm not a buyer yet still, personally. But, good to see it bounce back for all those people that were way underwater there. Hopefully it continues to move up for them. I personally won't be part of this play here at all. Either way, if anything, I'd be more apt to look for it shorted towards that 200-day MA, quite honestly, than anything else. But again, one of the big gainers of the day, up 6.7% in the pre-market. As we get ready to open here in about 10 minutes, SPY does look to be opening up at a new all-time high here. So, we do see some positivity. It's been a little bit of a melt up. It's still, it's going to open at an all-time high. The question is, can it hold it today? What do you think there? Are we going to see a little bit of positivity? I think there's some pent-up demand personally here. What are you thinking?
Okay. The one thing that's in the SPY, one of the biggest holdings in the SPY, and that one place that Warren Buffett did not take out his position is Apple. And Apple has an event this week. They're going to launch that event on Wednesday, tomorrow, probably mid-afternoon on the East Coast. And they're expecting a we're going to call it the generation iPhone SE, 4th gen, I guess, and a new MacBook Air possibly, and possibly a new iPad. So Tim Cook is really saying that there's going to have something big and something new. All right, well, that's okay. If something new becomes a new color, okay, no, will fall. If it's something new as a new product, a new line, oh my, the stock will go through the roof, and SPY will go even higher, and that will be a good thing because Warren Buffett will be a happy camper. But I want to see what Apple has to do. They've not been innovating. Now, for me, if everything stays the same and they work on the Starlink integration, that thing works in the summer, and I may switch my Android over to Apple.
What did you just say?
That's right. I might switch from my Android that I've had for, I don't know, 25 years.
I was about to say, for those of you that don't know, that is pretty big news. It shows you the strength of what Starlink it means to these companies. So those of you that don't think it's that big of a deal, Steve has been as anti-iPhone over his life as any person that I know. But it shows you, because you want it for when you go on cruises, right? I know why you want it. And then you travel a lot, and it will allow you to connect and not have to worry.
Never have to worry.
I know your answer without even asking on that one. Yeah, definitely. We'll mention, Steve, Intel up another 4% here today. News over the weekend, sort of, that maybe a combined takeover attempt by TSM and Broadband. You buying that? You think there's any legs to that move?
Let's see what the Trump administration has to say. If they are pushing this, I will tell you that Marco Rubio is on board, the new Secretary of State, and Marco Rubio removed some strong language on Taiwan that they were happy about, and China probably not so happy about it. That removes some barriers for Taiwan Semi. So yes, there is a good chance. Now, what Intel does very, very well is the replication of and distribution of chipsets. They're having a hard time and struggling with new chips and growing the chipset. But they have the distribution. And we've always said that, right? If you want to know a good company, can they reproduce it fast, and can they duplicate it, and can they distribute it? And Intel can't. So any company coming in will be very happy right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be interesting to watch. If they do break it up, as I mentioned it on Friday, I think you could see it get pushed by, if anything, the Trump administration, because it would strengthen ties between the U.S. and Taiwan Semiconductor, and by proxy a little bit with the Taiwanese government. So could be a move one here to keep an eye on for sure. Steve, we have had some earnings already this morning, some positive earnings. We had seen Vulcan last week really drop down. It is bouncing back today on decent earnings. I do have that here on our ticker and on some notes here. There it is, Vulcan. Oh, you already put it up. Sorry. I had some takeaways that I had there. They definitely had a strong EPS, up almost 70 cents from where the estimates came in. They came in at 217 versus 146. So a really nice beat there. Pretty much just a match on revenue. So earnings definitely was stronger, almost $300 million versus an estimate of 227. So strong look there. They said that there was some favorable pricing trends that they see expecting to continue, and that their public construction volume was supporting their growth there. So again, we do see growth within the materials and building sector. That's good to see. We talked about how they might be a company to take a look at with everything going on in North Carolina. Now Kentucky, we haven't really mentioned that. Our prayers go out to the folks in Kentucky, first hit with terrible floods, now getting hit with winter storms. It just seems like, I haven't looked at MLM today, but Martin Marietta should be one that should be sort of on your radar, right? With this type of what we're seeing needs to be built out here over the next 24, 30 months.
Yeah, I mean, let's see how much Trump builds on the roads. He's promised to the infrastructure of the United States. It's crumbling with bridges falling in the last few years, issues. You know, I think that's one of the things that the Biden administration failed at. One of the many was infrastructure. And in this country, infrastructure is paid for by two things, federal taxes as well as gasoline taxes. And we know gasoline taxes have been very, very, very high. And so there's no reason for that. So if we are to see that promise being kept, then infrastructure needs to be cleaned up in this country. And look, very simple. If some of this Doge stuff that cleans up, some of the messes around the world that we're spending money on, they could easily fix roads and bridges and all the things that need to happen of the next year or two. So I kind of like this idea. This is really good. Now and Martin Marietta and Vulcan will be huge beneficiaries of that as well. So also
absolutely.
URI, United
It's
Rentals.
a decent looking chart too. It's in a nice little spot. Still got some good room to the upside. Pretty good. Martin Marietta's chart a little more choppy there, I would say personally. For it, Mag 7, NVIDIA, Steve, we got to talk about it. You and I both in long positions there. These are long positions that we're sort of looking at for 2025, at least myself here, up nicely, back up around 141 here. So, we've talked about it. We know the demand for those AI chips. Did you look this weekend? I did a little bit online. They're still not available. You can't get a Blackwell RTX.
What did I say? I said it 2 weeks ago. I said it last week. Same thing. The demand for RTX 5090s, the demand for the Blackwell chipsets is just outrageous. It's so bad that firms are literally trying to get them to the people that want them and not just to the scalpers. That's how bad it is. You ever want to know if something's in demand? If scalpers are actually trying to get them, right? And it's a really bad problem.
Yep, they make a lot of money on it. I will say my Tesla position, I did exit when it hit 360. But those of you still in Tesla here, since that run up from 330 here, is retracing a little bit this morning. It's up about a 0.5 percentage point, but that was after losing after hours on Friday. Not one that I wanted to hold the overnight, just too much, going on there. Most of the Mag 7 moving up. Microsoft, one that you and I have talked about, sort of, blah, blah, not much going on in general, in our opinion, is the loser on the day, along with Apple down before that big announcement, like you said, that's coming later in the week from them. So we'll see what happens there as we are 3 minutes from the open. When we look at the Spider Select funds that cover the 11 sectors, we do see that 8 of those sectors are in the green right now, being led by technology. Most of the chip companies moving up tremendously so far today. Healthcare, consumer staples, and real estate, the 3 that are on the negative right now, with healthcare being so far the big loser there. I mentioned chips. If we look at the chip sector, you can see outside of broadband, all of the major chip companies up. As I said, NVIDIA up 1.83%, AMAT up 1.36 after poor earnings last week, had them down. Micron ones, that's interesting. They're up 3% today. They were up 4% yesterday. And I was looking for any news that was sort of good for them. And what I really only saw was that today is the last day to file a class action suit against them. So I was a little surprised by the fact that they're moving up so much on a day where that was basically the biggest news I could see there. But again, most of them moving up. I got a little bit of a segue there because I just saw that Marvel is up almost 0.5 point. I know, Steve, you're a movie guy and a Disney guy. Marvel's Captain America dominated the box office over the weekend. $100 million domestically, one of the first movies, I think the first movie of 2025 to do that. So the first $100 million movie in a weekend. A, did you see it? B, are you excited for Disney and movies?
Red Hulk. I mean, my favorite actor favorite living actor is the president of the United States in the movie, Harrison Ford. So he becomes the Red Hulk. So okay, yeah. I'll tell you, that's one of the things that we've added to Quasar Markets is movies and music, because I think it affects the markets. It does. I think, if you want to get really technical about things right now when it comes to the movies, Wicked is about to be on Peacock here in the next few weeks. So
I can tell you, as the stepfather of a 4-year-old girl, that's a big deal. Wicked.
That's right.
We already own the DVD, which I can't believe my wife actually still buys DVDs. So, and she's much younger than me, so I don't understand that at all.
If the world goes to hell,
Disney,
you got
I
DVDs,
love
right?
Disney here, a higher low with the higher high. So, just as a general analyst hat here, looking at
We are open here, Howard.
Let's get on it. Tick is negative to start off, 355 to the downside. Advanced decline, not very positive, positive 1,500. It actually didn't even move here on the open. So most of the things that weren't trading pre-market actually looks like they were opening to the downside. First hit on the QQQ, back to the downside, now only up 22 basis points here. Steve, do you think we melt up or melt down today? What are you looking at?
We go up. I think we melt up. I think the reason being is, well, 142.16 now. There it is, 142.22 now on NVIDIA. So if you've been following us in NVIDIA, got to be loving what we're doing here. I think we melt back up. I think we push back on up, Howard. I think there's so much going on. We're about to close that gap at 143 or something.
Yeah, I was saying NVIDIA is moving here, folks. NVIDIA, the big mover so far, up 2.68%, gapped up nicely, filling basically it has filled the gap. It's filled the gap right here that we had to the downside. So one of those filling the gap to the upside without a doubt. Yeah, Ron, Micron, we just talked about a few seconds ago, definitely popping. Palantir popping here. I had to say to Steve earlier, you know, I saw Palantir's CEO, who is a very brilliant man, but man, it's like watching Beaker from the old Muppets, seeing him on TV, huh, Steve?
That's funny. You look, he's a very brilliant man, and I remember when Palantir was completely beaten up. I was at a dinner once in New York, and everybody around me laughed at me when I said Palantir's the best stock to buy right now. People always ask me, what should we buy, Steve? Palantir. That's stupid. AI. They're not. They have all the contracts. They have all the government contracts, and they're about to be. You know, they're going to win them all. And
I will point out that you and I talked about it back here when it broke through this consolidation here after taking that dip. So if you were following us January 22nd at 75, we were telling you that it had broken the resistance and watch for it to set all-time highs. I didn't have it going to 122 on my bingo card that quickly, but it has. And it continues to seem to move up here. Palantir is definitely one that's continuing to climb up, 3.28%. Steve, also seeing most of the Chinese, we talked about it briefly in the open. Chinese companies moving up nicely here. We do have Alibaba, I will point out, has earnings later this week. One that I'll be definitely keeping an eye on here, especially, as I said, Jack Ma shaking hands and being seen in with President Xi Jinping there is a big deal, in my opinion, for that company. You can see Alibaba here moving up, almost broke 128 actually earlier today.
3 years ago, Alibaba and Jack Ma was considered persona non grata, PNG. And you saw where the stock went. You know, that was silly to me because Alibaba is the Amazon of almost all of Asia, right? And they're doing better than Amazon is in the United States when it comes to the size of the company. But Jack Ma and Xi Jinping didn't get along because it's not normal for a company to do that well in China, and it took off, right?
And he criticized the decisions, some decisions there, which is never a good idea.
Well, listen, at some point, Xi Jinping will probably move on. If you talk about the Western world here in a lot of ways, right, and you look at it from the perspective of the presidents, except for ours, everybody's pretty young. In the East, everybody's pretty old. We're seeing that now, right? So, wow, NVIDIA really moving here. 143.35 now at the highs of the day. Continuing. Look, Xi Jinping, will it change? I don't know. With the administration, but for me, I'm telling you right now, I kind of like the Jack Ma, Xi Jinping bro hugs lately. It's
Yeah,
good.
I got to be honest. I think it's good for Alibaba there. We don't tell you what to buy or sell, but I would be looking at it strongly here on any kind of dip. Talking about dips here, Steve, most of the food companies getting hit pretty hard here. Conagra down 8.1% this morning. General Mills down 4.88. Smucker's down 2.57. None of this is on earnings news. So this is just a general malaise across most of the food industry. We know we did
They're
see,
expensive.
poor results by Procter and Gamble last week. It looks like that's starting to weigh on it. Lululemon getting hit pretty hard here. One of Scott Bauer's favorites there. I know he likes to play that a lot.
Look at KFA. Look at Kraft Heinz. Okay, Kraft Heinz is a good example of that, right? I guilty as charged. I love my Catalina dressing. I think my wife buys it by the case.
Like that, Steve. You got that in common. She's a fan.
Yeah, and I like specific one. When it's in stock, it's the Catalina honey version. But you know who owns owns Kraft Heinz? That's Warren Buffett. So
yes,
yeah. So, but the aisle in our Publix, which if you don't know Publix is a huge brand here in Florida. Not a lot of other in the South, I should say. But the aisle for Kraft Heinz, the space on the shelf has gotten a lot smaller. And this is ketchup. And I think since Teresa Heinz and the former Heinz family has left Kraft Heinz, I think there's been a massive issue management of Kraft Heinz. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed here. If you look at a weekly chart on Kraft Heinz, and Warren Buffett's really taken a bath in this one. There's really been a very long sell-off, and look, it's pretty travels correctly. Like if you notice it, look at that linear regression on a weekly chart. But if you look over the last 10 years, oh my, Kraft Heinz has really been beaten up. And when I talk about mergers and acquisitions, this is one of those companies that could easily get bought out because they have what? Distribution lines. They already are in every single grocery store. They already know, and they have the ability.
They control a lot of the shelf space on the diagrams for the major companies. They've been installed in those spots. They have those connections like you're talking about. Man, you talk about it. This is the stuff that traded at 95 back in 2017. So when we say the stock market, you just buy and hold, you would think Kraft Heinz would be one of those companies that you could do that with, one of the stalwarts across America's grocery shelves. You would be down 75% from that time.
You're seeing a difference in people's eating habits. They're not eating processed food as much. And Kraft Heinz is a very large processed food.
They are all processed. What I would point out, though, Steve, also is this is something I want to bring up because we've talked about it. You've taught me this over the years, and I've been talking about it a lot lately with different coaches here on, Quasar, whether it be Agnieszka Wood or Jeremy Vreeland, Charlie Moon, Mark Petrino, all talked about this. It is usually better when you see something decline like this to get out of it and look for something with upward mobility. Because if you got into Kraft, even if you got it into the lows back here in 2020, you're up from 20 to 28. You're up 50%, not even 50% in 10 years. This isn't a strong. It just not everything goes up. As David Portnoy once said, right?
Yes, but I will say in this situation, if you are looking to a long-term investment, and Kraft Heinz will be a company that is willing to change their stripes a bit. I mean, they're an international company, right? I mean, I had to look up all the different things that they're in: Oscar Mayer's, Philadelphia cream cheese, Lunchables, Miracle Whip, Taco Bell, TGI Fridays, Velveeta cheese. I mean, that's quite a huge list here, and international, right? And especially, of course, Kraft Heinz is ketchup. So that was their original product. So but it is processed food.
Everything you just said, I was about to say, Steve, everything you just said, unfortunately for them, is a highly processed food with tons of high fructose corn syrup, and all those things that most people outside of the U.S. do not consume. Right. That's where I would say no. Again, if you thought it was a good buy in 2020, in the middle of COVID, even this hasn't even really bounced back from. The lows of COVID, it went down to 20. So, it hasn't. You know, it was like as our friend Mr. Wood pointed out, Jay Wood, if you bought Microsoft 18 months ago, you're at the same spot you were.
That's
You
right.
know, some of these don't necessarily move to the upside. You know, is it recession proof that from this level it probably doesn't go down 50% again? Yes, but there's not really, you know, some of these don't have the upward movement. They don't really recover. You know, Eastman Kodak would be one of those, right? You could go Xerox, you could just keep going to those companies.
Bethlehem Steel. I mean, I can tell you lots of
Yeah, that's what I
companies.
mean. Is you've taught me that. That's why this one's one that sort of looks that way to me. You know, it's sad to say, and I think you have a love for the company because of Catalina dressing. You know, hey, listen, we do. We're loyal things we liked as kids and we continue to like. But I would have to say, like you said, unless the Heinz family, unless something drastic was to happen for Kraft Heinz, this is a tough one for me.
Yeah.
You know, as we look at the tick here, Steve, it still stayed negative almost completely through the morning here. 832 here on the advanced decline. So again, we've lost about half the companies that were in the green are now in the red. So not looking so strong. With that being said, QQQ now only up 27 basis points. Has looked like it's found a little bit of support here after dropping for the first few minutes of it. But again, it hasn't been able to get a cross VWAP on the short-term time frame. We need to see that to think we've got even the ability to melt up here so far. SPY did break an all-time high at 611, but has quickly retraced about 50 cents here to 610.51. Dow Jones opening up in the red, down about 15 basis points. The rut is slightly up, but I expect that to be a melt off here. It seems to be. It gapped up. It's one of those ones that doesn't trade in the non-trading hours. It gapped up, but is in right now towards the lows of the trading day. Bitcoin back at 96,000. Not really very exciting. Not much going on there. Most of the alts were down pretty significantly this morning. They still are. Bitcoin, the only thing sort of holding up. The rest of them falling off. Gold so far, and when we look at it, 29.23, so it is holding up nicely, and we do see silver spiking up a little bit back above 32.50 here, Steve.
We're hearing reports several users are reporting receiving of FTX payments on the Kraken platform.
Oh, look at that.
So you're going to see a lot more selling in Bitcoin, I think.
Yeah, because I wonder what they're giving people and how that payout is. I wasn't a user of FTX, so I'm not part of that recovery system. And actually, because I never even pushed it to anybody, I was never a fan.
We could see 93,000. I mean, FTX has been
92 would be 92 is your next level of support.
There you go. Yeah.
I don't know. Remember though, they didn't hold much Bitcoin. Remember he was anti-Bitcoin, Sam Bankman-Fried.
That's true. He was.
But what I did notice and what I do see is the correlation to what you're saying. Solana, which was his number one, is what I noticed is down the most today at 5.9. Oh, down.
We're hearing right now that the head of the Justice Department's DC criminal division has quit, according to CNN.
You know, Steve, we haven't talked about that. We saw a lot of the New York AG disappear, quit too, right? And they're the ones that do a lot of the financial crimes. Now Letitia James is still there, but most of the others have left. Are you surprised at all by that?
Not at all, not one bit.
Yeah, I don't think anybody wants to be a DA under the new administration.
Would you be buying Solana here? Would you be buying Solana?
That's what I'm looking at right now, yes. As you know, I did a nice scalp on it recently. I was looking at, in fact, it still has my chart here. I bought it when it got down to 181 and then sold it on its move up. So I do like it here. I want to get out of the weekly chart though. Hold it 1 second. Yeah, I played it for a move up to 212 last time.
I like Solana here.
I'm going to try to get it at 165. I like it at 165 here as a play. I do. I'm going to go long Solana at 165 if I can get in. Put this back to my daily chart.
I mean, they're just now getting their payments now. Some people are reporting, so it's not completely done, right? I mean, they could keep going, but I think
Solana is one of the few that's going to be up from where it was when they lost it. So it's not one you're necessarily going to sell like Ethereum or some of these others.
So I just bought a huge amount of Solana here. I like this.
I'm turning a little bit lower. You do have really good support at 162 from about 160 to 162. You have some strong support here. And I would be looking for my first spot is targeting 183 from here, 183.67. Yeah. So right about that 183 spot.
I just bought a lot of Solana there live here on the show here. So
there you go. And I'm looking at it at 165. If it does drop down here, let me look at the short-term chart to see. Yeah.
Yeah, I like this. I like this Solana move. Thank you, FTX, for once again. You pegged me out again.
I'm going to look at it 165.49 here.
167.22 here. So I got to look where I'm at. I don't really notice.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to look at there.
Yeah, I got quite
a bit. We are seeing the Mag 7 in general moving negative here. Apple down almost a half a percentage point this morning. Google down 0.2. Amazon down 12 basis point. Meta, the big loser so far today, down 1.33. That's a little bit low for them. Steve, you interested in maybe a little scalp here on Meta?
No, I think Meta is run pretty high here. So I'm seeing Solana still slipping here a little bit, but I don't really care. I like this. I like this.
Yeah, I do think this will be at least a 24-hour hold for me, I would say. If probably 24 to 48 hours. If I had a,
I mean, because
I'm still waiting.
Yeah, I mean, back on the 16th, this was $200. Now we're 166. I mean, I like
it. It jumps every time. Solana has too much going on. It's where Trump's new World Liberty does a lot of its work. It just has a lot going on, and yeah, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of that buy, Steve.
All right.
Yes, fine, going nicely positive here now, 727. So buyers are stepping into the market here. We are seeing that for sure. Ticket 121. QQQ just went negative for a second, now back positive, but we are pretty flat here on the Qs. SPY still up at 610, but it had broken 611 as an all-time high. The Dow Jones down 15 basis points so far. The RUT is the only thing up, and it's up slightly here, so we're seeing a little bit. Steve, gold just hit 29.24 here again, so looking like it wants to run up again. Hit an all-time high earlier. It's at an all-time high again here. Here we are. Gold setting an all-time high, 29.25.30. Tells you pretty much everything you need to know, right?
Yep.
Let's see what's happening with rates as that's happening also. 10-year now, 4.51, up almost a full percentage point here. And this is another thing moving up on the day. Not at the highs of the day, but moving closer to the highs of the day for sure. Spider Select, we now see banking's gone negative. Consumer staples is negative. Consumer discretionary negative. Communications negative. Healthcare negative. So we see a lot of them starting to move to the negative side. Big winners so far, XLI, which is industrial, led by Vulcan and some of the others. We've seen that in the morning. And then you have XLU utilities. So utilities and energy seem to be the big winners so far today. So we'll keep an eye on that. DXY, Steve, just broke below 107 here. DXY, first time below 107 here in a while.
I was just seeing India and Qatar joint statement. Qatar side announced a commitment to invest $10 billion into India. India has been the place to invest in.
Yep, absolutely. Constellation still up about 5.44%. Stephen, interesting one, up 10.2%. Grab at GRAB, which is basically the Uber of Southeast Asia, Southwest, Southeast Asia. Yep. They are up 10.2%. I will warn people, I was actually looking at that this morning. The thing there to keep in mind on is their valuation. They trade at 51.1, excuse me, 76.2 times price earnings ratio right now. There. So just want to keep an eye on tremendously up when it comes to that. And that price to earnings ratio had me a little nervous when I was looking at that. It was a pumper earlier this morning. Tapestry up about 1.37 again. We are seeing some of these luxury brands continue to move up, as you talked about, Steve, over the last month or so.
Yep. The rich are still the rich, and as their dollars, as foreign money is coming in, they're buying these things, right? So I've said that quite nicely. LVMH is another one I think which you could look at too as well.
Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy.
And I'm telling you, you know, in the last few weeks, we've seen a few days, we've seen this price push up. Now it doesn't move very quickly, we know that, but that was one that I really kind of liked. So a lot of you might get picked up here, 165.86 here.
Yep, I think we will. I think we'll see the volatility push it down a little bit more. Nvidia now 140.84. Apple looking to try to go positive on the day here, 244.40 right now. Microsoft, sure, I made fun of it. Now it's gone positive on the day, so it's doing well. Netflix continuing to slide down. Meta continuing to slide down here. So we are seeing the Mag 7 hit us pretty hard here right now. Has the QQQ now down 5 basis points. SPY is holding up above 610 so far. That's going to be sort of the line in the sand. Any drop below that 609.95 level, you've got downside here back towards probably that 600 level. So keep
95.4 now on Bitcoin. Bitcoin's still slipping. I had a bad feeling about Bitcoin there on the back of that. But it could be the end of the selling here. I mean, we just saw a little bit of selling here, and from FTX looks like could be the end of it. Is there more to
give? Up 7%. So Intel continuing to moon up here. The key spot that I had pointed out, it got rejected just below that here last week when we were watching Intel, Steve. If you remember, I said to watch. It has approached 2630, which was the highs we saw in mid-November. Got rejected pretty hard at that level, right at about 26, and dropped down to this 2530. So that's the key level to do. Any break and hold above 2630 would be extremely positive for Intel on a longer-term continuation play for sure. NVIDIA back over 141, Steve. Oracle having a nice day, up 1.45%. You know, we talked about all of the Chinese depository companies here. We see a bunch of them, Planet Labs, PDD, which is Temu's parent company, Neo, Lee. JD is actually down, but Baidu and Baba all moving up here this morning. So we are seeing a nice move by most of the Japanese, Baidu, like JD, actually getting hit so far this morning.
Mm-hmm.
John Deere up 1.69%, moving up here. Dollar Tree has been one that's been moving up the last few days, Steve, up 3.58% here.
When the world goes to hell, people go to buy cheaper.
Go to Dollar Tree, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Nice little move up on Dollar Tree, 74.16 here, 358. It's got some nice room to move up towards that 78 level here.
Yeah, the shakeout on NVIDIA has happened, and it's going to go right back on up. But 166.40 now, 8 on Solana. I like this buy. I like this buy down here. I thought it was great.
Micron continuing to move up here, 104.18, so up 4.66%. Nike having a nice day, up 3.24%.
I will tell you, I have not bought Nike shoes in a while, and I like their new ND9s. They're coming out with a new shoe, and I like it, and it might be the first time I buy a pair of tennis shoes that are not Asics, because I love the Asics tennis shoes. I like these new Nike shoes.
Nice. I've always been a fan of Nike. Personally, it's what I tend to wear, but it is a real nice move, gapped up nicely today, and not on earnings there, so... they did have an announcement that Pershing Square has increased its stake in Nike by 15%, holding 18.8 million classes of B shares.
Yep. Makes sense.
Cleveland Cliff and Nucor both moving up a little bit here today. John Deere is the one that I told you that we were watching, and sort of that steel sector and commodities continuing to move up. So John Deere set a new all-time high here, 490.95 earlier. Again, this is one that I said I liked on that dip last week.
I think I said Indy 8. It's DN8, the Nike, the new Nike. I was looking at the new shoe. It's really nice. Yeah, I like the new shoe. It's available on March the 6th. So I do see Nike pushing higher. Yeah.
Shake Shack with a nice bounce up here, Steve, up about 5.29% here.
Yep. Shake Shack is growing. I like Shake Shack. They do make burgers, obviously, the way you like them. Shake Shack is big in New York.
Big in major cities. They've done a good job of expanding. It was basically Danny Meyer's restaurant. Danny Meyer's of Gramercy Tavern fame is the man behind Shake Shack. But a nice move up here from those lows.
Yeah, and I'm just reading now that the company achieved a record opening 43 Shake Shacks in 2024, bringing the total now to 329. But in 2025, this year, they plan to open an additional 80 to 85 units system-wide. That's doubling. So yeah, it's
and on a daily chart looks pretty nice here. It can hold above this like 113.50 area it got above it earlier. So any kind of break and hold above that, look for that for a continuation move too.
And as people move away from McDonald's, they're moving into Shake Shack, right? I mean,
yeah. And they're in a lot of stadiums. They're one of the companies that are definitely a believer in. You pay for A properties and you use A properties. Ron's asking our thoughts for W on earnings on Wednesday. So Wayfair.
You know what? If you don't have a new home, you're not spending money at the bank, and you're looking to put stuff in your home, and you just let it with Dollar Tree, right? Wayfair is a little bit on the cheaper side of well, in this case, furniture and other things, right? Wayfair does a lot of things. I think they beat on earnings.
And to go along with that, so does UBS. I was looking through here their headlines, and UBS says that Wayfair's Q4 sales expected to beat estimates with potential growth acceleration in Q1. So analysts predict a 28.62 upside in Wayfair. So that's from Zach. So we are seeing people that agree with you there, Ron.
And I also think that their advertising is done very well too.
Going into the earnings.
I also think their advertising is done very well too. I mean, they've got the singer there. She's one very, very popular, and I think that they've done a good job with advertising too. And their sales have been pretty good. It looks like they're now giving a 70% off for the President's Day and adding another day here, I think, if you're looking to buy. But their earnings are already done for this quarter, obviously. But they do have a reward system. They do have all those things. So yeah, I can see that.
Especially on a little dip today with everything. I mean, I will warn that most of the e-commerce outside of the Chinese e-commerce companies are down today. Most of that based upon consumers not having a ton of money, right? So that is the only thing that I would throw into that is as consumers are looking. But as we talked about, Wayfair would be one that would be a beneficiary of a trade down. Chip sector, NVIDIA holding up nicely right at 141.56 here so far. Intel up 7.88. Did get above 25.50. Tried to break 26 earlier in the day, but has pulled back. I did mention 26.30 as a key resistance spot on it to keep an eye on. Micron pulling back a little bit here now, only up 4% also. So we are seeing the chips start to pull back a little bit. Trying to see here. SMCI, the big winner, now up 12%, Steve, 12.77%. And it got above its 200-day MA here. So, man.
Shorts are covering. That's all there is to that. It's a short covering now.
Yeah, SMCI continuing to move up here. Definitely leading the market so far. SD Lauder, another one that I saw, Steve, was up early in pre-market. Earnings were a week and a half ago, so not really much news that they really had moving this up. Just seems that since disappointing earnings, people are having some faith in SD Lauder. I don't know much about the cosmetic industry, so I don't know, what's pushing it, but I can't find any real news on it.
Yeah, I know. I can't answer on cosmetics.
We are not the strong ones to tell you on that. URI getting hit pretty hard here, Steve. So the opposite of John Deere that we saw moving up over the last few days since the steel tariff stuff talked about. We see URI, United Rentals, it pumped up that one day, but since then it has really been taking a back seat, moving to the downside here. They did not have strong earnings back about 10, 15 days ago. Now down 4% here. Tell you what, they look like they're ready for a continued slide down back towards that 655 area here. There is not a bunch of support in this zone below where they're at right now
on Solana. So if you picked it up with us down there, you're clear right now.
Carnival down, Steve, about 1.6%. I didn't see RCL was not down in the same way, so I was a little.
I guess it's probably the best time to tell you I'm actually going on a cruise here in 10 days, Howard. So, yeah. So I
like how you break that in on the air, so I can't give you a hard time. Nicely done, man.
Yeah.
CCL down about 1.79. Does that start to get interesting for you? I know you're an RCL guy, but you made me a lot of money over the years with some good predictions on CCL.
Yeah, look, the cruise line's all the same, right? I think I made a post over the weekend on cruise lines and the number of ships. I always believe in best in class. Carnival is good for people who are looking to party. Royal is good for people my age. NCLH is kind of the same. I still think it's Royal. Royal brings in the most money. They know how to squeeze that dollar out of people. Trust me. And I will say that to me, it's still RCL. Now, RCL has made the biggest run, so it's a little harder to say that. But it's still, for me, I will say that, they threw 5 free cruises at me, and I took advantage of them. They might be having a little bit of a struggle with some of the ports now saying, hey, you know what, we're going to charge you more, and we may make you skip a few ports. But these new ships that they've got are very expensive. But they have one thing now going for them. They made a very smart move. Both of them did, CCL and RCL. They have their own islands now, of which they make their own money on those islands. They don't have to go to other islands. They just bought an island and built on it, which is smart and pretty good places. Where the hurricanes don't hit nearly as hard, and they've made some pretty good moves there, and that's money goes back in their pocket, where the money doesn't go out the door to another country. So yeah, I can totally see that. So yeah.
You know what's interesting? The only news I really see that's moving either of these is that Royal Caribbean insiders sold about $5 million in stock, is what seems to have it down today. If that's
totally understandable. I mean, the stock is
people take, I don't take a big. I watch more. For me, when an insider sells, it doesn't bother me as much as it excites me when I see an insider buy. If that makes sense, right? Because when an insider.
NAHB just came out with their new numbers. The 47 was what's expected with the consensus here. It came out 42. So we've been talking about the housing market for a while now, Howard, and we now see it. So housing market not good here.
Yeah, I mean, I have it up here.
Prospective buyers coming in at 29 versus revised 32 in January. Previous was 33. That's a big drop in the housing market. So not a good sign here.
And you can see here, that's a pretty ugly chart. We're not down in the 30s that we have seen a couple of times on bad news, but that's definitely not strong. As you've always talked about, most of these indices, you sort of use 50 as the midline. Above 50, it's expanding. Below 50, it is retracing.
That's correct.
And you can see here, as they're adjusting it as we speak for the new numbers, that downturn. And especially if you take a look at, this top line sort of move down, that's an ugly looking
And
trend line.
I would say look at DR Horton actually too as well.
DHI, for
Yeah.
those that don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure DH Horton is probably still slipping here. They are home builders here, and it's probably a more slippage coming as they're not buying and they're not building. Now, one of the things about that number, and I just posted it on Twitter too as well, if you want to read the numbers there, but the prospective buyer traffic is at 29. That's revised from 32, which was a previous reading of 33, which means not only are people not buying, but people aren't even looking. And that's really bad. So if you're looking to sell your home, not the best time to sell your house. I would hold off. If rates do come down, which I'm not banging the table yet because I know that there is inflation out there, but the Fed needs to keep their eye on these numbers. These are bad numbers for housing, and housing is one of the biggest money makers for people, for the country, actually, taxes especially on it. And this is a really, really not a good number at all. This is a really bad number.
Yeah, I will say for more of a long-term play, I do think DR Horton starts to get interesting in that 125 level as a key sort of support area here. And again, this is a company that was trading at 200 before rates just took that dive.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it from the perspective of home builders, right? As we are here,
they're sort of best in class. I think they do a crappy job of building homes as someone who owned one. But they,
I mean, they've been good to me. I will say this much that there's a couple things going against them. The first thing is inflation, right? So when they go to buy, products, right, like Martin Marietta and home building products, those prices have gone up a lot, right? And if you look at it from the perspective of selling the home, labor to sell that home has gone up, right? And no one's buying houses. So they're getting hit three ways a Sunday here. Now, they have nothing to complain about because if they lived through COVID, then they're all happy, right? I know that my real estate agent is a super, and he couldn't even keep them in stock, right?
Yeah.
But I will say if you are to see a change in the home buyers and home builders, that you need to see foot traffic. And if you're not seeing foot traffic, then that's a problem. Now, near my home in Florida, they're all still building. So they think maybe that things will change. But I don't think so right now. I mean, Lennar there, right? Lennar was
I think my sort of longer range thesis is if rates are staying high longer, the only people who sell homes are new home builders because they give discounts and they buy points for people because they own the mortgage company that gives you your original.
But they still have to borrow that money. They still got to get that money somewhere, right?
Well, so no, because they sell them right off. So in other words, what they do is they sort of fake the market. They give you a rate, they give it to you lower, and then about 3 weeks later they go, "Hey, I'm now, I'm I'm JP Morgan and I now own your mortgage."
But they still have to live by the disco rate is the discount rate.
Absolutely.
From the Fed.
But I guess what I'm looking at is they would be the first ones to bounce back as people go to buy homes.
That is true. Yes, correct. Yes.
It's where you get that, as rates are still high, that's why it's attractive. I know because that's what I did. I mean, that's what we did. We went with a new home. We went with Fisher this time as opposed to DR, but because they had rate offers that made it reasonable.
We're seeing a report from Bloomberg that says Lloyd's Banking, which is LYG ticker, Lloyd's Banking is assessing the skills of thousands of technology staffers in the UK to determine whether they can keep working at the bank once it upgrades its technology.
Wow.
LYG.
That's not, that sounds weird, but it isn't, because what it is they probably have a ton of old proprietary programmers that were dealing in COBOL and Fortran and Pascal still, because believe it or not, that's what those older systems are built on. And now those technologies are not usable at all, basically, as we've moved into newer technology and your scripts, JScripts and HTMLs. And as you know, all of the other stuff, React and everything else out there. Let's take a look here. We have gone a little bit over our time. We will stay for about 2 more minutes as we take a look here at what is moving up the most so far today. Again, we've talked about what's getting beat up so far: Conagra, Medtronic, Allegion, United Rental, General Mills. I see Autodesk getting hit pretty hard here today, Steve. Broadcom down 3.18%, while most of the other chips are up. And, you know, what I want to point out one more time, Steve, we talked about it last week. Look what's going on with MGM today. You know, down, one of the bigger losers so far this morning. And I only bring that up because they were one of the big gainers last week. So as we've been saying, be a stock picker, be a day trader, get yourself, you know, fairly flat at night, because if you rode this all the way up from that, you know, where it gapped up here at 38, it rode all the way up to 42. Guess what? It's back right at that 38. Yep. So I just want to bring that out. I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer for anybody, but, you know, that's just one of pointing out. That's what we're seeing. If you, these names all look familiar, is there's some of the names that were up the most last week that are now down the most this week. 4 gainers here this morning. Super Micro, number one. Look what's back up again. Same thing. Walgreens, right? 2 weeks ago, it was up. Last week, it was down tremendously. This week, it's up again. So again, it is a stock picker's market. Look at that move up here today by Walgreens again. But, you know, it has filled its gap now. So Walgreens has filled its gap.
I think Walgreens gets bought out. I really do. I think this was a company that was trying to buy Dwayne Reed and all those companies. And I look, I get that. But I think eventually, I think that this was the one that actually gets bought out. Awesome.
Well, Steve, we're going to sign off for this afternoon. I have Alan Ellman going on at 10:30 talking about IBIT using Bitcoin as ETF for a wheel trade. And as a little bit of a preview there, he made money on the trade already last week before he even got into it, basically. And we'll explain what that is there. That will be on at 10:30. We have Jeremy Vreeland and Matthew Tuttle on at 11:30. At 1 o'clock, we have Scott Bauer and Prosper Trading. I'm back at 2 o'clock with Charlie Moon and Anang Mittal, a foreign policy expert from the Trump White House from the first time. So he's coming on to tell us what he feels about tariffs and how these things are going to play out, what's going on in the Ukraine and everything else. So we have a busy day today here at Quasar Markets. We'll see you all back tomorrow morning with our man Big Beat. Steve, last word of the day. Are we finishing up on the Qs or down?
I think we slowly melt back up during the day. Yeah.
Okay. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody.